Hello and welcome to this panel on digital transformation, youth, and women entrepreneurship. My name is Dave Keating. I'm a journalist based in Brussels, and I'm going to be guiding us through this conversation about how digitalization and the general presence of the internet in our lives is changing the landscape for entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs who might have had a higher barrier to entry before in our traditional way of doing business. Now, digitalization, which we define as the use of digital technologies, data, and interconnection to change existing activities or create new ones, is well underway in all 5 African regions. It's allowing businesses, governments, and citizens to rethink the ways we approach finance, healthcare, rural access, or access to public services, and education. Information and communications technology infrastructures have developed steadily, and prospects for new projects remain robust. Yet, internet connectivity in Africa remains a challenge, and there are urgent needs to accelerate digitalization and create better digital infrastructure. Aside from the macro effects on the economy and the way we all live our lives, the age of the internet and e-commerce has also created numerous business opportunities for young people and women. This can contribute both to their economic empowerment and greater gender equality. Today, we're going to be looking at the ways that the digital transformation is empowering youth and women in Africa, and what challenges remain for fully harnessing the potential of digitalization. We have a great panel to talk about these issues with us here today. Let me introduce them now. So first of all, joining us remotely via video is Amr Talaat, Minister for CIT in Egypt. Then here in the room, we have Karen Keneza, who is Vice President of the ADEPT platform, the Africa-Europe Diaspora Development Platform, which is a pan-European network amplifying the influence and impact of the African diaspora and its development. And then we have George Asamani, Business Development Lead for Africa at PMI, the Project Management Institute, a professional association. Thank you both here in the room and remotely for joining us today. Minister Talaat, let's start with you. In Egypt, you've been focusing on a digital transformation strategy looking specifically at skills development and innovation. How is this strategy helping young and female entrepreneurs specifically?
Thank you, Dave. Great to be with you. Sorry for not being with you in person because of COVID reasons, but I'll try to be just as effective. First, let me commend the title of this very important session, because I really believe that digitalization and more access to the cyber world does contribute to the welfare of youth and women. In Egypt, we've embarked on an ICT full-fledged strategy 4 years from now that has one of its core pillars dedicated to capacity building and expanding the skill pool of our youth and women. We've started several training and skill development initiatives across the spectrum of all specializations of ICT. Also, these initiatives were designed in what we call a pyramid format, because of course we're Egyptian, everything has to go in a pyramid forum. But the idea here is to have a wide set of training opportunities for a larger number of people to benefit from it, to get them ready for the labor market as quick as possible. When I say quick, it's like 6 weeks to 3 months, and then they're ready to get into a job. And then as you go up into the pyramids, or you create the value space, you get into specialization that need more time but create more value, and thus the number of participants become a bit less. Just to illustrate the sheer volume of training initiatives that we're currently delivering, In only 3 years, we've been able to multiply our training budget in the Ministry of ICT in Egypt by 22 folds in only 3 years. We started with 50 million. Now we're at 1.1 billion as our budget for training. The number of participants has also been multiplied by 50 in order to expand this skill pool. We have several of these initiatives that the main benefits of are the youth and the ladies. One initiative that we call Egypt Forward is pursuing a blended model where all the material is on a platform on the web, but there are coaches that can help the participants and explain whatever is difficult for them. I just meant a couple of examples that I believe would illustrate the value of this initiative for the tiers that we're talking about, namely youth and women. I've met a lady who has stopped working 17 years ago after she graduated to take care of her children. And then she felt a need for work, an economical need and an intellectual need as well to fulfill herself. She got into this training. Now she's working remotely from her house and earning $4,000 a month. She received a training for 3 months in data science that refreshed her memory on what she has learned way back in computer science, in faculty of computer science, and then she's back to the market. Another lady that I have met is has started an e-commerce platform where she lives. Now she has 4,000 ladies that are doing artifacts and selling on her platform. So she is working, she's helping 4,000 ladies earn a living. This, in my view, is the impact that we are trying to make through digitalization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Talaat. Karen, one of the things the minister was just talking about there was training, and we know that training is really important when it comes to digitalization because these are really specific skills that it's not something innate that we know as human beings. We actually need to be trained on it. How would you say that training can help with entrepreneurship, especially when it comes to the diaspora that you specifically work with?
Thank you, Dave. Actually, what the minister is saying is very important. And if I give you the diaspora point of view, we operate as such. So diaspora has been operating and serves as a bridge between both continents, Europe and Africa. And the work we've been doing helps to create innovative opportunities and create a gateway actually to additional opportunities for the diaspora. You have seen these past few years, people have been investing and structures and institutions have been investing more into digital transformation. Why? Because COVID has forced us to look actually the problem in the face and tell ourselves, okay, so the traditional way of sending remittances is kind of challenging for the moment. So what can we do actually to overcome that challenge? Through training actually for the diaspora and for the youth and the women and from the continent. Why youth and women specifically? Because they are also identified as the weaker, if I may say, a group on the continent and are one of the most important group of entrepreneurs, informal entrepreneurs. So how did we operate in ADEPT? Knowing that ADEPT is a platform that facilitates the cooperation between Africa and Europe for the diaspora when it comes to project and program, promotion. We have collaborated with digital platforms such as iDigital, which is a platform that has been specifically created for and with the diaspora to organize programs and trainings online throughout the world. So what we did is we collaborated with iDigital to put in place a digital program for a few weeks, a few months actually, in which we had 300 participants throughout the world from the diaspora and the continent who were following a training followed by a certificate in digital transformation. So actually what we saw there is that there was a huge need. So we didn't take more students because it was a kind of pilot phase to see how much people and the target group were going to respond to that. There is another way we collaborated and we supported actually our members. We supported our members in the diaspora. How? I can take the example of a groupment, a network of doctors from Sudanese origin that are working in the UK. What we did is that we supported them in creating an online e-learning for doctors on the ground in Sudan. And this is how also we participated in the training for digital transformation through the transfer of the know-how knowledge digitally, which was a kind of not premiere, but something that we didn't really do before because we really liked to have a personal approach of it. But we saw that it worked very well, and it's another way actually of helping through training for digital transformation. We also operated on the African continent. For example, for a digital program in St. Louis in Senegal that actually helped to see how we could tackle the youth unemployment, which was very high actually at that time. And we could see that the government in Senegal was also investing in means to tackle that issue. So I think they invested around 400 billion CFA franc at the time to see what kind of tools was going to be put in place digitally to overcome that issue. So as you see, actually Diaspora has been working very tremendously these past months to see how we could help the continent from afar.
So we know that also in the area of training, professional development and professional contacts are really important to the development of these digital skills. At PMI, what are you guys doing, George, on the topic specifically of youth and women entrepreneurship and also removing these old traditional barriers to entry that used to exist?
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. And good morning to everyone in the room. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is George Asamani, as you mentioned, and I cover Africa for PMI. Everybody knows digital transformation is absolutely critical, and digital transformation does not exist without project management. Project management is all about how do we get things done and done well. You know, we need to think about what are we trying to do, what are the objectives, what are the risks, scope, timeline, all these things. And so when we look at what's happening across the continent, I've been actually taking notes that the previous speakers have been speaking, and what I'm going to say actually just confirms and resonates what some of you have already said. The good thing is we're seeing a lot of investment into digital transformation across the continent. We talked about some of the startups that and entrepreneurship initiatives that Adept is working with. We're seeing a lot of tech companies and also organizations invest in digital transformation to move into like the next phase of, let's call it, the fourth industrial revolution, where the world is going, everything is tech. So digital transformation is absolutely important, and project management is the driver behind doing that well. Of course, a lot of this is catalyzed by COVID. Some of the transformations that occurred were not by choice because we had to. It's the classic case of innovate or die. And so there are two aspects to digital transformation. Of course, there's the policy, which actually the minister from Egypt really outlined nicely, and I'd love to see how we can replicate that across the continent. But I'll leave the policymakers to speak to that. And then there's the people. You know, when we look at people, this is where PMI sits. PMI is all about empowering people to do what they do well, to execute well. And we also believe that actually education and, like you rightly pointed out, practical transferable skills are the way forward. So if you look at the journey of a young person, coming to the question about barriers, if you look at the journey of a young person, from primary school, secondary school, all the way through to university, there are several barriers that exist at the moment. Hopefully these will be removed, but at the moment they do exist. First, you've got access to education. Second of all, when you get access, there's the challenge of quality, or the barrier of quality to education. Once you're in a university, hopefully the quality is good enough to get you a job. So actually, even before the job stage, hopefully when you're in an institution, what you're being taught is actually what you can use in the real world. So that's what I describe as a third barrier. And then the fourth barrier is really around, once you've got the skills and your job ready, are there jobs that are ready for you? And this is the whole challenge of unemployment. So you've got these four barriers that a young person faces or has. And so what we try to do at PMI is we try to walk with the youth and the girls, and actually all the youth, not only girls, but also boys and male and female, apologies. So we try to walk the journey with young people, and to say, look, yes, you're going along this education path. It's the typical path that everybody knows. And yes, there are these barriers, but we want to walk this journey with you, and would like you to think about how you get things done, right? If you want to be an engineer and build a bridge, yes, you might be doing an engineering course, but take a step back and think about how it's done. You have to think about the risks. You have to think about the timelines. You have to think about the objectives. So this is completely separate to the technical skill of being an engineer. And these are life skills that will go forward with you regardless of whether you become an engineer. You could become a film producer and the same skills are still relevant. And so we have various initiatives that impart these skills, right from primary school, secondary school, university. So at primary and secondary school, we have what you call project management skills for life, where we simulate through games how to acquire these transferable life skills, i.e. project management. At the university level, it gets a little bit more serious, where we look at, okay, how do you get certified? So we provide certified training in project management, for example, this CAPM, which is a certified associate in project management. And then one of the things that we do that personally I love is around providing free training through universities to students to help them to build apps using this relatively new concept of low code, no code, right? And that's basically, imagine if you could build an app even if you're not a software developer. For me, that's mind-blowing, because personally, I used to be an entrepreneur. I built a tech business before, and I know how difficult it is. I know the barriers that exist, right? So we have various technology partners where we can come to students or come to universities and say, hey, think about low code, no code. Technology is the future. We're providing this to you for free. Learn how to build an app. You don't have to code. Low code, no code provides the sort of like the tools for you to do that. So to answer your question, we walk along the journey with young people and get them to think about not just the technical stuff that they're learning at university, but also the life skills that will go beyond university all the way through their lives. And actually, I want to point out, I've mentioned universities a lot, but actually, we have a lot of young people who are also outside of that ecosystem. And so we're making a concerted effort to work with partners who also reach those young people as well. Again, because the skill of project management is applicable anywhere. So.
Thanks. We're talking about training and how we develop these skills with people. We know that, I think, and you mentioned this, that you could prepare people for the jobs, but if there's no jobs there, exactly, then there's no good. But also, if the infrastructure isn't there, then it's no good. If we teach people these digital skills, but the infrastructure to connect these digital tools isn't there, that can be a real challenge. And this is a particular challenge in Africa, we know. So, Minister Talaat, let me ask you, What type of things are Egypt doing to address infrastructure challenges, infrastructure gaps, and particularly with kind of youth and women in mind?
Thank you. I think it's a spot on question because no matter what we do in terms of digitalization, in terms of digitalization and upgrading digital skills, if the infrastructure isn't efficient enough, if it's not wide enough and far-reaching enough, then there is little that can be achieved. Africa is a good example for this. Only 40% of us Africans are currently connected, which is a very low figure. And that does not speak loud for digital fairness and digital justice. So a lot that us as governments in Africa need to invest further in the digital infrastructure. We started this in Egypt again 4 years ago. And then the average internet speed for the fixed internet in Egypt was no more than 6 megabits second. And we ranked number 40 in Africa out of 43 countries. Egypt was ranked 40. We started a mega project back in 2018 and 2019, all throughout 2019, where we invested more than $2 billion in order to upgrade the fixed internet infrastructure. Currently, our average speed has been multiplied by 8. So we're north of 40 megabit second, and we rank number 1 in Africa in fixed speed internet. We were fortunate that we started this important project before COVID, because we all know how the dependency on the cyber world has quadrupled with the outburst of the pandemic. Had we not finished this project before the outbreak of the pandemic, it would have been very difficult for our people to exploit the internet or access the digital world when the pandemic started around 2.5 years ago. Now we started with the second phase with this infrastructure project, but we're more ambitious. It's not only about speed now, it's about the reach. So we have a project in Egypt that we call Decent Life. Decent Life is about providing the services that are required for each and every citizen to have a decent life in all the villages of Egypt. So we have 4,500 villages in Egypt where we are providing a decent and reliable sewage system. We're providing electricity, clean water, and high-speed internet. So for the coming 3 years, we're expanding our fiber optic network to reach each and every household in each and every village in Egypt. 3.5 million households where around 58 million people are residing. The important and interesting issue in this context, I believe, is that when we decided what are the services that are necessary for a decent life, these services were not limited to clean water and electricity and a good sewage system. But we considered high-speed internet is as important and as vital, and there can be no decent life without access to the internet. So we decided this is part of this Decent Life project. So we've currently started the project. As I said, it's going over several years to reach 60 million people by the end. Meanwhile, we're investing another $2 billion in the cities of Egypt. So decent life is about villages and rural areas, but we're expanding also the fiber optic network in the urban areas as well. The other point I would like to mention to the respectable audience is a project that we call HARP. We have not forgotten our African neighbors and friends. Egypt, for those who don't know, is responsible for transferring more than 90% of the internet data between Asia and Europe. So cables come under the sea from Asia through the Red Sea to the Egyptian shore on the Red Sea, and then through a domestic network in Egypt, we transfer the data to the Mediterranean and off to Europe, and vice versa for the other way. So Egypt is a major passage for data between East and West. Now we are building a new system of submarine cables all around Africa that will benefit from this international infrastructure that Egypt has. And we're starting with landing stations in several African countries across both the east and west shores of Africa. And the second phase will be from those countries on the shores onto the landlocked countries in Africa. So we're doing our best to contribute to the capabilities of our African neighbors to avail digital access to Africans across the continent. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister Talaat. That's very interesting about the fact that 90% of the data coming between Europe and Africa is going through Egypt. I didn't know that, and it makes the role of infrastructure in Egypt all the more important. Karen, I imagine that infrastructure is quite important when we're talking about connecting the diaspora to people and businesses in Africa. How do you think some of this connectivity can be improved?
Actually, it's a very, very interesting part, actually, of the subject. So what we have done within the diaspora, we are working, like I said, with local also organizations, and we have seen these past years that there is this need, actually, to be able to maneuver from a traditional, for example, a traditional business to e-business, for example, in order to vary the kind of product that they were selling, and be able to not be only reliable of the ground. So for us, it will be very important to see that the continent is investing more into infrastructure so that we can move a little bit further into digital transformation and be able to kind of respond to the local needs when it comes to how can you, people in the diaspora, help us get on the page when it comes to become more competitive with the exterior. Because it's one way actually to advocate for Africa to be a little bit more sustainable and independent for certain services, but what is put in place in order for them to become more and more specific and expert in their own field. So it makes me wonder, actually, to come back to something that maybe we will talk a little bit later, but I want to tackle it now. We were talking about remittances and the new challenges that we have to send remittances the traditional way we used to do it as diaspora. So you have to know that the remittances from the diaspora to the continent represent around 3 times the volume of the official aid coming from Europe. And this is only informal. So can you imagine if we could only use that amount of money amount to use it in a productive way and invest it very rationally and objectively in certain infrastructure like digital transformation now. Imagine what kind of impact we would have on the continent. And you can see more and more people and organizations and youth organizations from the diaspora wanting to take part in such process. We don't just want to come and develop projects. We want to be part of specific programs that are going to be able to develop the continent. So this is really what it's missing when it comes to also diaspora involvement in such policies. It's not only a north-south collaboration of processes and policies. You have to know that the diaspora is a bridge between both continents, and it should be seen as a gateway to put in place innovative policies and innovative way, actually, to see international or north-south cooperation.
Yeah, it's a really interesting idea, organizing that money that's traditionally come via remittances in a kind of targeted way on things like infrastructure, on things like training for digital development, on e-commerce. That's a very interesting idea.
Instead of only relying on the countries to invest and on the European, actually, in international cooperation to come up with the structural answers. Diaspora is here. Yeah. They have the know-how. They have the expertise in Europe. They can participate with skills transfer, but they can also participate with funds and remittances transfers that have been objectively identified. This is somewhere to go also.
George, I was just going to ask, I mean, on this subject, you could address this as well, and then also just in terms of infrastructure, how important is it when you're talking about project management, in particular when we're thinking about young people and women?
Sure. So on the point of diaspora, just in addition to what you said, I think diaspora should be customers, right? Sure. If you look at the number of diaspora outside of Africa, that is Africa's customer base. And so I think it's absolutely important for diaspora to be engaged with Africa, because sending money is great, but then being a customer actually potentially could add even more value.
Investment.
Exactly. So that's what I'll say on that point. In terms of infrastructure, I think it's all been said. As I mentioned earlier, project management is about how do you do what you do, but do it well, do it in an ordered way to maximize the results. So whether we're talking about digital infrastructure through technology or physical infrastructure through laying down of cables, it all relies on order, it all relies on planning, it all relies on great financial management. And this is what we do. This is what we're here to support other organizations and educational institutions to do. Yeah.
I have one more question for you, George, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for questions. You guys can get your questions ready now. When we're talking about e-commerce and some of the new ways that we do business, transitioning from, as Karen was talking about, transitioning from traditional businesses to e-commerce, what kind of opportunities has this opened up for women in particular, maybe facing less barriers than they might have faced in traditional businesses, the e-commerce? Is it easier for women to enter that?
Is that to me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I think it's probably an easier question for women to answer. But as a man, being objective and seeing what we see through our work, I think there's definitely some certain barriers that don't exist because of the digital age that we're in. Some prejudices will not exist because you're not face to face with however or whoever might prejudice you as a woman, and so one of the benefits, as we all know, of technology or digital is that it's boundaryless, right? It doesn't rely on borders. It doesn't rely on people to move forward. So I think from that point of view, there's probably a benefit there. But at PMI, a couple of things that we do is first is role modeling. Right, we have some amazing female leaders in the project management space, or just generally in the what we call change maker space. People who are leading and people who are making things happen. They are in some of the leading companies across Africa, some of the leading educational institutions across Africa, and they are our partners. And we give them the platform through our communities, our chapter communities, our corporate communities. We give them the platform to reach out and to role model to younger women, because everyone knows that when you see someone who looks like you, who is doing something inspirational, you develop the aspiration to actually also do that. So that's one of the things that we do. And then in addition, we also give young female entrepreneurs, again, visibility. So we have what we call the Future 50, and we really, really try to make sure that we have good opportunities and representation from female founders. Great examples are people like ERA, which is Emergency Response Africa. They're a great startup. There's also Jetstream Africa. Fantastic. Both are female founders and CEOs of these organizations.
Karen, would you agree that e-commerce presents maybe a lower barriers or different kind of set of barriers for women?
Oh, exactly. I think it does. I think I read somewhere recently that 30% of the continent tech professionals are women. So it really translates into women are there actually to develop and innovate in that field, and it's going to be interesting to see how it shifts the paradigm as from now on.
Okay, let's check and see if we have some questions from the audience. Does anyone want to ask a question to the panelists, either a remote panelist or the panelists in the room? Go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, I have a couple more questions then for the panel. People are feeling shy. So when we're looking at segments of society, so we've been talking about youth and women, and that's kind of in dichotomy to men and older people. But we know that also dichotomies exist between regions and between different social classes. So Minister Talaat, let me ask you, how do we also bridge the digital skills gap between different segments of society, different regions, rural, urban, richer, poor? How do we bridge the access to digital skills so that everybody has kind of an equal chance?
Well, this is very important because in many cases, it's easy to slip into focusing on cities, on the capital, on the main cities where it's easy to access, skills are there, and easier to mobilize any initiative. But again, if you can leverage the infrastructure to work for you, then you can have access to the talent everywhere across the geography or the country where you're operating. When we launch a training initiative in Egypt, the reason there's always a digital dimension to it is to make sure that each and every applicant has a fair chance. If you're living in Cairo or if you're living in the farthest city or village close to the borders in Egypt, you can still access this initiative. You can still get into the training room, the class. You can still access the instructor. You can still access the material remotely, and hence be able to benefit from these training initiatives. This is very important because anywhere in the world, and Africa is no exception, always people living in rural areas are less privileged. And hence, it is our commitment and our responsibility to reach out to these people and make sure that they are included. We're just launching in Egypt a new initiative these days that we call Digital Egypt Cup initiative for students starting grade 7. School students starting grade 7, that this is around 12 or 13 year-old students, all the way to grade 11. And one of the criteria that we focus on when we're selecting the participants in the initiative is the geographical distribution. Egypt has 27 governorates, geographies that we need to ensure that the percentage of students benefiting from each of these geographies is equal, so that the main cities do not cannibalize the resources. The second, of course, important dimension to your question is the economical and social dimension. The less privileged always should have priority in scholarships. in the fiscal resources that the government must avail for this sector of people. We have a university that is specialized in ICT that the ministry is overlooking, Egypt University of Informatics. And within this university, we have around 50 to 100 full scholarships every year to distinguished students who are incapable of paying the tuition fees for themselves, in order to make sure that there is not one student who has the mental aptitude, who has the ability to enroll into this distinguished university, but because of financial reasons, he or she cannot access this fine training or fine education. So if they are qualified academically, the ministry pays for not only the tuition, but also for their accommodation. Moreover, most of our training initiatives and programs are for free. And this is why the budget has been multiplied, as I said, by 22 folds in 3 years, because we're launching all these training and capacity building initiatives completely for free. Students don't pay for any tuition costs. Hence, we're availing this knowledge and these training opportunities for the less privileged in an equal format. Thank you.
Thanks. So we do have a question from the audience here. If we can just bring her a microphone. It's coming momentarily. It's her right here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your interaction. And I couldn't agree more when you look at having a portrait of women and youth, and not only from the big cities, because, so I'm from Algeria, and we do have also amazing women that are doing tremendous work in the Sahara. But one thing, so my name is Shiraz Ben Seman. One of the initiatives that we have launched in the last 2 years have taken the forms of African webinars. So every month we meet with African authorities. We talk about experience sharing. What are the main hurdles? What are the main challenges? And one thing not to forget is we still have a lot of informal market in Africa. We're talking about digitalization. We talked earlier even about infrastructures. And a lot of these people are also in the remote areas. How or what could you suggest for these women and this youth so that we can bring this informal market, have them leverage the digitalization and making sure that they don't miss it, and we help them also with structuring their businesses at the end of the day, because keeping them from not only being, you know, alimentary just to feed themselves, but really scaling it up. Thank you.
Let's put that question to George. What do you think? How do we bring this informal economy into the digital age?
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I think I would look at it in 2 ways. The first way is, what do we have now that we can use? And the second way is, what do we need to develop for the future to make it better? What do we have now that we can use? You know, I know that some of the telecoms networks in our region, I have examples from Ghana actually, where 2 telecoms networks are actually working together to improve their network coverage to reach rural areas. So that's all about collaboration. So with what we have now, I think there needs to be more collaboration for the greater good. Of course, some of these telephone networks or telephone companies exist to make a profit. However, I think nowadays everyone's talking about purpose and sustainability. So I think the profit will come if we also focus on purpose and sustainability in this specific example. So I think that's what we can do now. Looking forward, I think it's all about innovation and having an open mind and thinking about how do we solve some of these complex problems. For instance, I know that right now in Zanzibar, there are trials going on which are about taking balloons across the island to provide mobile network rather than using towers, right? That's innovation, right? Setting up balloons, and actually they're also based on blockchain. So it's a completely different way of providing telephone network into the rural areas. Yes, the startup cost might be more because of where we are right now in our technology curve, but in terms of what you can achieve, it's phenomenal. That's what I think.
Well, it's a really interesting example. So that's all the time we have for our panel today, but I think we've stumbled upon some really interesting areas of agreement here, and certainly there are a lot of possibilities for the future as we look ahead. So thank you so much to our panelists, both here in the room and remotely. Thank you to the audience for following along, and that concludes this panel. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.